Hello, my name is Tom van Dessel. I am the owner of SPLASHWORKS and you are watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to A Student's Perspective, the weekly series that connects students with designers, manufacturers, educators, industry professionals, and design media celebrities to hear their stories on just how they've gotten to where they are now. Through our conversations, we connect the past, present, and future of design to show just how much we can learn from each other to grow towards our fullest potential without prescribed limitations. Think of A Student's Perspective as a weekly design lecture series from the student's point of view. A Student's Perspective is a division of the nonprofit University Hall of Innovation, whose goals are to connect students with the design industry through design challenges and mentorship, and a collaboration with the Marywood University Interior Architecture Program in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All interviews can be found in their video format at www.astudentsperspective.tv. For more information or sponsorship inquiries, please contact universityhallofinnovation@gmail.com.
Welcome back to A Student's Perspective. My name is Paige.
And I'm Steven.
And today we're here with Tom van Dessel of SPLASHWORKS, and we can't wait to dive into this little conversation that we've had. And we've been talking a lot this week about the space that we're in and the progression of High Point Market and a lot of these different integrations that all relate back to design and the core of what we're here for.
We're here at Spring 2023 High Point Market, and just about every person we've talked to or every showroom we've gone into, the name SPLASHWORKS comes up in some way, and so we wanted to make sure to come over here and get a chance to talk to you. And can you give us a little bit of your background before we get into SPLASHWORKS, but kind of what led you into the design industry in however way that happened, and yeah, just give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, okay, well, probably more of a circuitous route actually. I didn't follow a traditional route to get here. I'm a Belgian national, so grew up in Belgium and in England, partly went to school in England, and then really started working for a big American corporation completely unrelated to the design industry. And had a 17-year corporate career in variety of roles in manufacturing and marketing and sales, some internal consulting work. And then in 2000, and so that brought me to the United States. So, lived in a number of places, St. Louis, Cleveland, Pasadena, back over to Europe, back to Cleveland. And then I was actually with a very good friend of mine who was in the design industry and had a furniture line that he had just launched. And I happened to be on a business trip back over in Belgium. I was staying with him, and we just got talking and said, hey, this sounds like a really great idea. Let's launch it globally. I'm living in the US, you're in Europe, and so I actually quit my 17-year corporate career to jump into something very, very different. And no regrets with that decision at all. It's definitely opened up a lot of doors and a lot of avenues. It was a little bit frightening at the time, because I was already married with a few kids and some financial commitments, but at the same time, very, very liberating to be able to do something yourself. And then that business was in, as I mentioned, in furniture. So we were doing furniture for primarily offices, and we were capitalizing on the fact that a lot of offices, this is around 2009, 2010, most of the offices were going open plan, and so the open environment brought with it great advantages for interaction and collaboration, but also brought some challenges in terms of acoustics and separation and delineation of space within those big open areas. So our furniture line at that time, again, this is another company, not currently, was focused on that element. How do we provide aesthetically pleasing acoustical solutions and furniture pieces that fit within that open plan environment? It was very successful. A lot of the West Coast tech companies were the early adopters for what we had, because it had a great look, and obviously the functionality met their need for open space and collaboration. And that was great. And we had a good run, for about 10 years. And then late 2019, we got an opportunity to be acquired. So, so we sold the company, and then that gave rise to what I'm doing now with SPLASHWORKS. But there is a relationship between the two. So even in the other company, I was looking for a way to image one of our acoustical materials, and had in the meantime already moved to High Point to start the manufacturing for this other business, and was looking for a solution to do that, and found the capability in town to be able to print onto our acoustical wall felt. And that then opened up a whole new era of all these possibilities with custom art and custom acoustic panels, etc.
So it seems like the design industry, and it goes across the board, everyone we talk to at every different showroom, once you get in, you don't want to leave. And I think that's kind of how your career path, the decision to leave corporate culture and venture into something new. What was it that pulled you in to have such a passion for it too? Because you talk about design philosophies. I see you talk about conceptually worked pieces, furniture pieces, because you gravitated from each portion of the industry, moving into the acoustical panels. They're still all relative, but how have you defined such a passion for this field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's such a common theme throughout what you do, and especially in the home furnishings portion of design, because I think design is instrumental to anything, whether it's what you use in the kitchen or even in the automotive industry. But it's always about creating an environment or a flow or a feel-good factor of some sort. So no, design, I think it permeates everything what we do, whether it's the functionality of a product or creating an environment or a sense of space. I think even more so recently, and I think, funny enough, I know COVID is still on the tip of our tongues, but when you think about just what we went through as a population, and you think about the mental health challenges, and then you look at designing of the spaces and the comfort, and though it's become even more important. I think it's getting more and more elevated, where people used to look at space or an office or even a home in many cases as just a functional something. And yes, there's always a faction of people that said, yeah, but it's also a representation of my personality, etc.
Yes.
And I think that's becoming more and more widespread, that more and more people are gravitating towards that. But then you think about those functional spaces, and that's across the board. It's not just in your home, but think of yes, for sure, the office, but what about the teacher's lounge, or what about the classroom, or it's in every faction of our society and our community. You can pinpoint back and say, well, if it was better designed, it would be a more enjoyable space to be in, and that's directly linked also to mental health ultimately. So it performs a really, really important function from that perspective. So really, from a social aspect, I think it is key. We are so fortunate that here in High Point we have this tremendous ecosystem of everyone is involved to some degree in this design, this world of design, and there are so many touch points and so it's kind of almost like it's become a common language of the High Pointer, is to be involved with design and in design in many aspects. And again, you don't necessarily have to be a designer to be passionate about design and to understand design. The designer comes in because they have the expertise and the skill to help maybe the vision come to life. But ultimately, we can all be designers in thought, even if we're not necessarily designers or able to design in action.
Right. Yeah, I think something that what we've just kind of talked about that's come up a few times is the designing for something that has multiple purposes. Okay, so not just thinking about, I'm designing a chair that is only a chair and it only serves one thing. Right. When you mentioned kind of thinking about the acoustic properties of a piece of seating, that doesn't happen very much. Right. You know what I mean? It's always, okay, so this is going to fulfill this need, and then someone else will fulfill the acoustic need, and someone else will fulfill this need. And so I think that idea of combining is really interesting, and I think is where I know, in hearing from people around market, I think it's what really draws people to you is it's not, okay, we have artwork and we have acoustic things. It's like, wait, we can do
It's integration.
It's the old Reese's peanut butter cups where it's like, you got your chocolate and my peanut butter. You know what I mean? It's like once they come together, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now what else can we do?
And it totally elevates
Absolutely
the experience and the functionality
right.
of what it is.
And a lot of times those very technical things have throughout the years have tended to be the non-aesthetic things where it's like, okay, yeah, that is going to absorb sound, but you don't really want to look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you can combine those to where you don't necessarily think about those things and what the environment is, but it's functioning well, it's like, yeah, that's a beautiful kind of thought. And then where does that lead to kind of past that? I think that's really nice.
The first, I'd say for me, maybe the aha of that dual functionality was actually in the previous business where we had a lighting solution. So it's interesting. We had panels that you could hang from the ceiling, and then we also offered a lighting solution. But it wasn't until we realized that the designers, whenever we got into a project, the designers were always struggling with the panels because the panels would interfere with light and interfere with sprinkler systems and interfere. So it's like, what if we just combined it and then the lighting is the acoustic, you know? And that was the first, and they said, why didn't we think of this before?
Right.
You know, it's utilizing the same real estate, which is your ceiling, but it's now double functionality and it meets code and it does all the other things that you need from a commercial design perspective. And, you know, ultimately, that's the same with the art, right? Yes, there's an aesthetic, but how do we make that double up as something that's functional as well? So now it becomes much more than that. And actually, very often, it also, you can go the other way. You can make it purely functional and actually blend in with the capabilities that we have, because not everybody wants a bold piece of art on their wall either. But how do we make it blend in? So we custom colorize it to make it blend in.
So let's talk about the technicalities of some of the stuff that you're producing here at SPLASHWORKS. I don't think our audience knows the full breadth of what you experience, I think, just in your showroom, which is what Stephen's beginning to describe about the integration of these things. But let's begin with kind of some of these acoustic technical elements.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about our process is that our printing process, basically it's not a layer of ink that is put on a canvas. It's called dye sublimation printing, and your audience may be familiar with that. And it's used mostly in the apparel industry. And what it does is it actually, you know, we print, or we put the ink on a paper, and then it goes through a heat press, and under heat and pressure, the ink actually turns into a gas. The fibers open up, and the ink is entrapped in the fiber, so it becomes really one with the material at a molecular level. That has a couple of advantages. It's not blocking any holes, any openings in that material. It's also very durable and cleanable and etc. because it's a permanent bond. But from an acoustic perspective, that's particularly important because now, because it's still an open cell structure, what we can do is we can put the acoustic insulating material behind it, and it can still be functional and work. If that was a regular canvas, or obviously wood or glass or paper or anything else, it would just reflect sound. Now it allows the sound to travel through so that it can actually be absorbed by the acoustic material behind it. Then combining that with another air gap behind it, which you get because obviously art is in a frame and there's a certain thickness, now you create a reverberation chamber. And so basically the sound travels through, gets partly absorbed by the acoustic material, sits in that air gap, and then it just loses energy when it bounces around in there and dies, right? So that's the technical aspects of the acoustics and why it works.
And then absolutely aesthetically too. I mean, to me, this changes how you view acoustics in general. We're used to seeing these, I don't want to say absolutely god-awful, but these panels that exist on the walls, and they seem to be thrown just to project something. You identify how that's serving a purpose within the space, but aesthetically, it's not offering you much. It may be offering you a touch of color, but is it offering you design? Is it offering you concept through the artwork, through the piece, and how it's being able to be framed on the wall? To me, they usually become disjointed, and they have to have a fully cohesive plan to fit without the room in order to be involved. But you're able to use your acoustic panels in order to vignette spaces in order to tell a story.
Yeah, and carry the theme of the design intent through into
right,
that
without having to
system.
push it behind a boundary, because
Right.
normally those have to be integrated forcefully, and this is a seamless process. So can you talk a little bit about the artists?
So what we do is we have 1,500-1,600 different images in our portfolio, and then about twice a year, actually during market is usually how we time it, is we'll launch one or two new artists. And the collaborations with our artists are very organic. They always happen by referral. We don't necessarily, I mean, there have been one or two occasions where I've really liked some art that I've seen maybe on social media, and I've contacted the artists. One of those, Siobhan Dwyer, was exactly like that, and I really contacted her because I wanted a particular piece of art to put on a mural in our break room, actually. I thought this would be really good, But then that conversation led to, have you ever collaborated with an art reproduction company? Maybe we can work with you there. And then many of the others are just people that hear about what we do and are interested in maybe launching a reproduction art line. But what's really important about those relationships is the conversation. Yes, obviously the art has to appeal, and has to give something different, something special. But it's really the story. How is the art reflected by the artist, or how is the artist reflected back in the art? And I've had a few artists come with a portfolio that is very diverse, and it shows their technical ability. But it doesn't show what's inside of them, and that's I say, wow, that's phenomenally good art. But I'm not getting who you are. What does it mean? And that's the most important thing: is how's that story told? And that's what's wonderful when we then have our artists in the gallery and they have an opportunity to talk to some of our customers. That's worth everything, right? Because then they talk about how that came to life and why that is special to them and what that means. And then you see it. And you can almost put a picture of the artist next to the art and identify how it fits, fits that persona, So that's always the most interesting piece. And luckily we have. I'm not saying they're lining up, but we definitely have. We always have 2 or 3 people who are sort of, ready to collaborate with us for the next 6-month period, kind of thing, to get that going.
Yeah, I think that relationship between the artist and you as a reproduction art company, I think, is really important, because that doesn't happen everywhere. So if you come to High Point, make sure you come here, because this office, like you've explained it in the past, is a showroom. It is a gallery of these pieces. And
Shoffice,
yes. And so my training is actually in fine arts. I'm a painter and everything. And so I've shown in commercial galleries, and there is a stigma between kind of fine artists and the commercial world of I'm not going to, my art is too good for this or whatnot, based on maybe some of the places that we've seen through market, that it's not quite there. You don't get that feel for the artist. But coming into here, it's an entirely different feeling, and I can tell that you've curated that, and that that relationship with the artist is very important. This is a fine art gallery that is about reproductions, and it's about that idea. So it's not only kind of taking the artwork and potentially turning it into an acoustic kind of thing, but it does become about that relationship between the artist and the collector and whatnot, and these are finely crafted enough that you don't see them as reproductions.
Right.
And I think that's
I appreciate
been a beautiful.
We're hitting our intent.
Absolutely. That's
yeah.
So from someone who has kind of experience on both ends of things, I think I'm really happy to come into this environment and just kind of absorb that and hear you kind of talk about that.
And I think a lot of the reproduction art has become overly commercialized, in the sense that it's sort of been, here's a theme, and I have a couple of technically sound artists working for me, and they get commissioned to do a series of this or a series of that because they know how to do it, that's not how we work, right? We don't have staff artists painting for us. We literally, work on existing portfolios, and say, no, this is your body of work. That's what we want to see, not because, we've asked to create X, Y, Z because we think that's a trend.
A specific bill.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've had that discussion of trends often throughout the market.
Yeah.
Anything that pushes beyond that is what we look for.
Right, and that's. I think it's our Shoffice. I live in here every day, so it has to continue to inspire us as a group, because a lot of this is also about our culture, and how do we continue to inspire, everybody that works here, and I think that's also part of that, the fun factor there, right? Is that it makes it interesting and it keeps inspiring people.
Yeah. So thinking about those acoustic solutions and things. So, is there anything that you have planned next? I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but for me, thinking about this, I see these almost the opposite way. So rather than sound absorption, is I've seen a lot on kind of floating wall speakers and things, and ways to think these could easily be turned into those kind of. So it's not absorbing, but it's projecting.
Right.
And I think that would be beautiful, because speakers aren't necessarily the most attractive things in the world.
Right.
And if you could hide those and whatnot, I think that could be really interesting. But I just think
it wasn't on my list, but it's a great idea.
All right. We'll talk, no, I'm kidding. But I think there could be some really fun kind of things that happen there.
Definitely, a lot of it is about which surface. From a business perspective, you're also trying to maximize the real estate that you can occupy with your product, right? I mean, there's still, we're still doing this. We're still a for-profit, right? So we have to think about that as well. So definitely, we have the walls kind of covered in terms of, we have solutions for that. But the ceiling is also a very important area that we can grow into, and where there are a lot of possibilities beyond what's available today. There's already some really creative things out there, but I know that we can add another dimension to that hasn't yet been fully utilized. And the customization piece, I think that's the other thing that kind of sets us apart a little bit, is that we have a common set of ingredients, and we rejig the recipe to get to a different solution. It's not always the same solution, so that it provides, without providing too much complexity, we're able to provide a lot of customization. So it meets very specific needs, as opposed to very standard finished product ideas.
Right. So we keep talking about this Shoffice and how, the close integration of being within the work and being able to work side by side is something I think a lot of companies achieve or look to achieve. Maybe don't successfully because they're not as immersed in the embodiment of work and art that you guys have. Usually they're a little bit more segregated, I would say, when it comes to those scenarios. What's it like having these close opportunities so close to work and develop solutions? Like you just kind of said, reaching another solution. I think when you're able to see it firsthand, along with kind of devising solutions together and being able to communicate. Another reason we really enjoyed entering the showroom for the first time was being able to talk to one of the artists, because she was at work herself while we were just meandering through for the day. And then we get an introduction that's not just your typical showroom introduction, and we get to personally talk through some of the solutions and concepts that she developed through her paintings, and learn a hell of a lot more once we're at that close, intimate scale.
Yeah, because yes, it starts here. So let's talk your example about the artist and the artist being here. The specific artist that we launched this time, Victoria Bayliss, we had the opportunity to work on a different project together that was a commercial project, which was a one-off, and she created a piece of art, and we worked with that. But in that process, in that collaboration, she came and looked at our process. So from an artist perspective, she got to find out how our process works. So then she could think of, well, how am I going to adapt or adopt my methodology to make sure that really comes to fruition? Because we use, as you've seen, we've used a lot of different textiles and fabrics. So the texture and how a certain image translates to that texture is critically important. So she really understood that. Again, I don't think it's hard for an artist artist to understand that, because you're dealing with that all the time. But the fact that that was something that she was able to understand, that was part of the process, really helped inform her how to create some of those pieces. So that's one area of collaboration where it really helps to have such an intimate closeness in the entire process, from the concept to the graphic development to the manufacturing to the final product. It's the same in our environment here. Everybody's involved in that. I mean, we have the folks making the product. They see art come through every day. They have opinions. They may not view themselves as being art critics, but they are.
We all have opinions,
right? And so from the people who are doing the graphics work to the people actually handling it and building it and assembling it, they all have an appreciation for it. And they'll, you walk through and say, "Oh, I really like this piece." So that's great, right? That's inspiring for them, but it also informs us because it gives you feedback, in the process. And even sometimes we're not 100% sure with a piece of art which material it would look best on. So we always do these tests, and that's actually a conversation with the people on the machine, making it. So say, "Hey, so what do you think?" And even beforehand, they might say, "Well, I think it would look really good on this. We should try that." So that's obviously worth its weight in gold. That you can really have that dialogue. Obviously, being a small company, that helps, and that's usually the challenge with bigger businesses is how do you not compartmentalize when your operation gets much larger. So that's just a distinct advantage of a smaller business. And then I think the challenge for business leadership is how do you hang on to that as long as you can as you grow, because obviously it continues to be everyone's intent to grow your business as well. Another dimension of that is the collaboration. Again, I'm going to point back to High Point and this phenomenal ecosystem that we have. So even when we're finding solutions where we may not have a component of that solution, it's a phone call away. It's probably a half a mile or a mile,
a walk down
or a walk down the block, and we can have that conversation like within the hour or within the day or that afternoon, or just and that's so valuable too. We have in the last, I would say, again, since COVID, and I know High Point by Design, which is this great collaboration of member showrooms who are mostly vested in the community here, so who are local and present in this community. We have all collaborated so much more as a result of talking more, and now we're doing projects together, and to reach out to those fellow members of High Point by Design at the manufacturer's level that was not even the initial intent that would be, but that's this unintentional amazing benefit that we got out, because we really were doing it for our customers and the community, but amongst ourselves we've strengthened that ecosystem and just the knowledge of each other's capabilities and how we can leverage those, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that, we had a discussion yesterday about this very thing, is it's easy for businesses to kind of get stuck in that one model and saying, okay, this is the way we've always done things, and not necessarily having that opportunity to push forward. Because it takes a lot to change, because you're going to lose something in order to change, and you're always jumping into the unknown and whatnot. And you brought up a great kind of concept. It was the burning platform. Was it? Yeah. So you want to explain that and how that helps to? It's like change doesn't happen. It doesn't happen easily.
I didn't invent the term, but it's for anyone that's studied change management as a phenomenon. The world is changing around us all the time, and sometimes we can rationally see that the change is necessary, but change only happens at an emotional level. You have to be emotionally affected before you can actually engender change in yourself or in others, and you have to speak to people's emotions. So the only thing that gets you there is a burning platform. It's that absolute sense of urgency that makes something become emotionally connected, and that is the only thing that really changes behavior. COVID was our burning platform in this community, where all of a sudden there's no market. What are we going to do with our? It suddenly was a wake up call that really started to have that different way of thinking and different need, and also broke down a lot of barriers that were there before. You know, the barriers of not being pro-change, but also the barriers in thinking, in paradigms. It shifted a lot of paradigms. Like, okay, you know, this community had been so used to doing things for such a long time that even though it was not a novel idea to try and have the intent to be open year-round, people have probably talked about that for 35, 40 years, but it never happened until there was this burning platform. They said, okay, we probably need to do this, and this is a good idea, you know. So it still takes effort. You know, it's not like all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, let's be open year-round. But there's definitely a bigger willingness and a bigger acceptance, and a lot of people who are applauding it and saying, okay, that's probably the way we should be going. So.
Yeah, and High Point itself, for those of you that don't really know, it's a city of design. There are 2 million square feet of showrooms, and there are showrooms that are only here during market, and people that are only here during market, and then there are the others who are embedded and are here year-round. And I think that was the impetus behind a lot of High Point by Design, because it's the people that this is your home and this is your community, and you want it to be more past just these 2 weeks, which these 2 weeks are great.
It's the Super Bowl.
Absolutely,
we all like the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And we need the Super Bowl.
But there's 50 other weeks. And it's not, it's your quality of life, but then it's your business too. And we've heard from designers who said, okay, our area doesn't have certain things. We would love to be able to, say, outside of market, be able to go to High Point, meet with people, do things, and continue to grow that way. So there is a need for it on both sides, and I think that it's great to see that change from the outside, and to see it develop. And every market that we come, just seeing, okay, what's new and what's different. It's like the baseball stadium comes, and then the next thing, and it's just
And like I say, it's about community, and ultimately, as we all grow and our families grow, and that's one of the things as well. Is like people are starting to realize, well, if I actually want my children to come back to High Point, then the city needs to have more to offer. You know, so it's those. I always say that you know, it sometimes it comes across as being, wow, you're putting all this energy that's so altruistic and generous of you to do that, but every altruism or act of altruism has an egotistical motive too. It's like, which is, but it's going to benefit me in return, because now it's a more desirable place to live, and you know, family and friends will want to come here. You know, so those are always you know, they go hand in hand, right? So,
and those are really the things that stick, because otherwise it's okay. I think this is everyone's gonna love this, and then it flops. So it's like if it's going to benefit one person or benefit a group of people, then it's going to go outwards, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to drop this in an area and say, okay, this is going to fix everything. It's like, okay, how it's going to fix from the inside and then blossom out from there. And so, I think those are those natural moments of change where what I've seen from some of the companies involved with High Point by Design is, when we first talk, it's okay, we're thinking about this, this, and this. And the next time it's like, well, now we're thinking about this, this, and we've changed this because of that. And it is that malleability of saying, we realized that wasn't going to quite work. Or somebody from the outside wants to come in, and now, okay, that's a new factor that we've got to try and deal with and figure out how to do it. And so, there's...
have to stay flexible.
Absolutely. And that family of businesses and designers and whatnot, I think has been a beautiful thing, because you're all kind of competing with each other in some way, but knowing that, I think you also said this too, and it's just that rising tide lifts all ships, you know, and everyone is going to benefit from someone else's success, and it's going to affect everything, and that again is something that I haven't really seen everywhere throughout the time I've been coming to market, starting in 2015. And so as an outsider's point of view, it's like, it was always kind of odd, and
everyone was sort of, you know, oh, you can't come into my showroom. And I'm like, no, we're opening up. Anybody can come and take a look. That's fine.
And even to the point of, so we've been introduced to other showrooms by, like, presidents and owners of other showrooms, and they're like, oh yeah, you need to go check this out, and you need to do these things, and it's like that's such a breath of fresh air, and wonderful to be able to show the next generation of designers and students and educators and manufacturers that it's like, okay, this is a model that can work. This is a huge thing that we're all going to benefit from each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you already mentioned this to me previously, but we've talked about community now between High Point. We've talked about the designers, and that third factor that you continue to talk about is also students. How do you see the future, again, still moving forward, and how you've seen it change as we bring more students in, how we try to get people involved?
Yeah, I think it's such an important piece of what we do, which is to be able to show actually what a fun, interesting segment this is. You know, so the students are an important piece of that, because we also need to. The industry went through this whole process of offshoring as well, you know, and I think maybe at some point in time, people were thinking, well, if it's all being made somewhere else, then maybe it's being designed somewhere else. Well, the design actually never went away; it always stayed here. So the generations of designers to come through are critically important. That we are close to them, and that we know where they are, and can show them, you know, what great opportunities there are now. At the higher education level, the students already made that decision. We are also really interested in the, you know, high school student, and maybe even at the middle school level, to show them that there is a real opportunity in this segment. You know, because where you know, you can only hope to do something if it's visible to you. So how do we open that up and let people see what those opportunities are, and that will give them inspiration and opportunity and drive to move further into that area. So the student population, again, it's yes, higher education, but it starts before that. You know, like really give them, and that's ties into the community and inclusiveness and diversity, and making sure that people understand that, wow, there's a real big opportunity here, and the more people we can have from varying backgrounds that we have to contribute to this, the more exciting and the more special it will be.
So could you speak to also High Point by Design, if not everyone's familiar, of the way in which you're opening your doors to everyone?
Right.
And I think even shifting yourself a little bit off the further campus of the central identity of High Point Market, being out here, there's just a new identity and an opportunity for people to come through and just have more conversation and progress. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so obviously, so the mission and vision statement for High Point by Design is to create this year-round destination for design and creativity, and that was really yes, it's driven through our industry affiliation. But it's much bigger than that. We wanted to be part of the revitalization of this great city, and tying all this amazing, you know, talent pool of this amazing ecosystem together. But part of that is it's been such a closed. It was a closed-knit community that didn't really open the doors to everybody. You had to be many years ago, you had to have a brick-and-mortar retail store to be allowed in a showroom. Then gradually designers started to be allowed in. But there was a time before you started coming in 2015, but there was a time when a designer wasn't even allowed in the showroom. You know, I mean, crazy when you think about it now.
It is, because that's the majority that's welcomed now.
Exactly. Well, and in terms of registrations, more than 50% of the registrants of High Point Market are designers, and there's different needs there, because designers need product all the time. You're not buying for a season, so it makes sense anyway. So the industry has moved and evolved, and I think people are more obviously comfortable with that now. But we haven't yet been that comfortable with the community to come in, and that's something that we're also doing. It's like, hey, you don't have to necessarily sell to the consumer, because you might not be set up to do that. And even if you are going to do that, make sure that your pricing policy is watertight, so that you don't circumvent your trade client, because that's important. You know, the designer still specifying your product and bringing your product to the consumer. So you definitely don't want to go around that. That's critically important from just a business perspective. but having people, it's a bit like the Wizard of Oz, right? Peel back the curtain and see what's happening.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It provides such inspiration for a lot of people to either be part of the industry or just to understand what this community is about. And many of the folks in the community who are not involved in this industry have never been invited in, and they've always felt, well, we're not part of the team, we're not part of the clique. I'm not allowed in. So there was a little bit of a divisiveness, in the community, like, oh, you had the furniture people and the non-furniture people, and we're saying, no, for us to be successful as a city, there is not one and the other. We're all part of the same community. So how do we open it up and make that more accessible, so that it's not this fear of, I can't go in there, that's a furniture showroom, or vice versa. You can't come in here because you're not a designer. It's like our doors are open to anybody, any time.
Accessibility, that's something that keeps coming up. We talk about resources, and not only is networking providing that, but the opportunity to join these showrooms and have these walls kind of broken down. I mean, you can't understand it until you experience it, until you're within the showroom. You could look online, you could look on these pamphlets that kind of no longer exist, these brochures of furniture. Those things don't represent what you can experience firsthand, something that's curated by the designers and composed by the designers. It's something that we try to remind the students that it's very important to think about what these showcases and what these events could offer you.
And like you say, the layering, the textures, the feel, the quality, those are things that, even though our world is increasingly going virtual and 2D, those are things that technology has not been able to supplant yet. It may come, but right now it hasn't yet, and that's, again, we think of how do we experience anything? Most of the time we think, this is actually kind of interesting, because most of the time we think, well, we experience things by seeing them first of all. Well, adding acoustics into the mix, well, now there's a sensory, there's an auditory experience there as well. Well, there's also a tactile experience, there's a smell. I mean, all our senses are part of that experience. So when you think about, here you have a full sensory experience and a full brand immersion, because that's the other thing that's hard to replicate in a virtual environment, is how do you get fully, immersed into the brand. And I think I think we try to do that in this showroom, but then you definitely have, our friends at Varellen, I talk about a full immersive brand experience. That you can get a sense of it from a brochure or from a virtual aspect, but you can never experience it like you do there. And that's from the smells, the feel, the look,
breathe, eat it,
exactly, the food they serve, the people you meet, right? It's the entirety of that, and I would say that thank goodness that is still important, so that we can continue to do these things, because it sets it apart from just the screen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something that I know. So I've been bringing students since 2015 to experience this, but we cannot stress that enough to future generations, current generations of designers, that you have to make it to High Point. Even if it's not every market, it's you have to make it at least once a year just to experience it. You have to see these things. You have to immerse yourself in it. It's something that you think you understand until you're actually here. And that's just been an amazing experience.
And it helps, because ultimately, as a design student or a designer, or in the design trade, whatever your function will be there, you're going to have to convey a message to someone else. The best way to convey that message is to have experienced it yourself. It's back to that change management thing. It becomes an emotional connection. If you have an emotional connection, it changes your behavior and your entire persona of how you can share that experience with somebody. So yes, I agree. It's a critical aspect of. I'm
wondering if we're beginning to do that by even filming within the showroom. I mean, we've we've brought the podcast to several different locations before, but we're used to having it at the Suites at
Right.
Market Square, where we set up in our own booth.
Yeah.
Entirely in different environment, and I'm only imagining now how the sound quality is probably going to be the best on this one, just based on the space that we're in. But you can get a great deal of conversation. This is an atmosphere in which we had the conversation last night.
Right. Yeah.
One that just happens as you're walking into these showrooms.
Organic.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
In many ways.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are trying to create as much FOMO. We want everyone to be here, but I think we're getting close to the time, our time limit, but we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we really appreciate everything you've been able to share with us. So that leads us to our final question, which we talked a little bit about before, because I like to give you a little bit of time to think about it, but and it doesn't even need to be extremely kind of like deep, it could be anything. But so if you could go back to your student self and maybe give a piece of advice to yourself based on everything that you've experienced up to this point, is there anything that stands out that you think that might be?
Yeah, so I was, you made me think, by asking it earlier, you made me think of it. So I think as soon as I started working, that was actually starting working, I suddenly got it that I needed to make the most of every opportunity that comes my way. I didn't do that as a student. As a student, I kind of went through the motion of I'm doing this so I can get a job, and I didn't take every opportunity as a student to make the most of it. And it's really interesting because I now have a freshman at college myself, so my eldest son, and when I see what he's doing, you know, in terms of making the most of that experience, I'm like, wow, I wish I had done more of that. Even in his freshman year, he's already, you know, do it, and that's something that I can advise, you know, all the students, like, make the most of that time. Yes, socialize, yes, have fun, yes, do your academic work, but it's more than that. It's what are the relationships that you can build, not just with your fellow students, but people in the industry, you know, that you're studying or that you hope to be a part of, you know. Get those, you know, be curious and get those experiences in. It's gonna make your your actual student time more rewarding, and it's definitely going to help you beyond that, you know.
Well, you've obviously set that example for him,
Yes.
and been able to engage him in such a way that kind of builds into that, because not every student does that.
Right.
And that's a consistent thing that we hear is from this same question is take advantage of everything. And with our nonprofit, one of our taglines is take chances, take opportunities, and take charge of your own education.
Yeah.
And that's important because so many people are graduating at the same time as you, and they're all going to look the same, and you're all going to have the same experiences and whatnot. And it's like, what's going to set you apart?
Yeah.
So that's. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for welcoming us into here.
Anytime.
And for those of you at home, if you enjoyed this conversation, please like, share, and follow on all of our social media platforms. And make sure and tune in next week as the conversation continues.
From a student's perspective.
We hope you liked this discussion with the design industry from a student's perspective. Please like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations to come.